Hello everyone, this is a question and I am back with my final reading log for 2022. This is everything I read in the month of December. A bunch of classic series, a bunch of really great series that I've been waiting to read for a long time, and very few series that I didn't care for. So let's get right into it. I'm going to do this the way I've been doing it for the last few of these reading logs, where I'm kind of going to go in reverse order of how I rated stuff on Goodreads. So the stuff I enjoyed the least, going up to the stuff I enjoyed the most. So let's get started. Okay, so first off, we're going to go with the only book that I gave 2 stars to on Goodreads this month, and that was The Innocent. This is by Yen Press. It looks like this original idea is by Avi Arad, who works in Marvel movies, and the script on this is Junichi Fujisaku, art by Yasung Ko. And if I had to describe this in any way, I would just say completely forgettable. I read this in the beginning of December, and if you put a gun to my head, I couldn't give you one sentence about what this book was about. It was that, just the plot, the characters, zero interest in anything that was going on in it. I know it has to do about a detective who dies and is like come back to life to try to solve a crime that he didn't get to solve. So that's basically, I had to remember that from reading the back. But otherwise, just a very boring book. The artwork was fine, but yeah, not very impressed by this, and so I will be unhauling this book. Okay, so the last book that I am going to be unhauling this month that I won't be keeping in my collection is a short 4-volume vertical series, and that is A School Frozen in Time, art by Naoshi Arakawa, story by Mizuki Sugimura. And so this series is basically about a group of 8 students who go to school one day, and they're the only kids there, and they cannot leave the school. So they actually talk about it in the book. It's actually kind of reminiscent of like a drifting classroom, where they're kind of separated from the outside world. They don't have any connection, and these kids are trying to figure out how they can get out of the school. And so it basically revolves around, there was a kid in their school months ago that had committed suicide, and so they're trying to figure out who this kid was, because none of them for some reason can remember who the kid was, and they're trying to see if it's one of them or if it's another student. So the basic premise of this story is not bad. It's just the characters and the kids in this book are just very uninteresting. None of them really have you connecting to them and make you interested in what's going on. The artwork, I've heard great things about Arakawa. The artwork in this is pretty bland. I was not very impressed with the way the kids are drawn. There's a ton of panels of just surprised faces. And when you have 8 kids, it'll be like a full page of just showing every single kid's surprised face in a panel. So you could probably get this down to 2 volumes if you removed all the panels of kids doing surprised faces. And so, yeah, just not, I mean, it wasn't terrible, just not very engaging with what they built up with the plot. And then it ends not great either. The first couple volumes I was kind of interested in what was going on in the story. By the time you got to the 3rd and 4th and you actually see what happened, lost all interest in it. So I think I gave the first 3 volumes like 3 stars, and then I gave the final volume 2 stars. So that was A School Frozen in Time. I've heard good things about this series. It just didn't connect with me at all. So this will be getting unhauled. Now we're going to go through everything that I gave 3 stars to. So first off, we have Shortcuts, Volume 1 and 2 by Usamaru Furuya, creator who I've read some other stuff by. This is an out-of-print Viz release, and these are, like the title says, shortcuts. So you have 2 to 3 page stories, almost like little sketches. It kind of reminds me of like a sketch show, where some of the sketches, the characters will be in another story, maybe 20 pages down the line. But yeah, and they all revolve around Japanese teenage girls, specifically ones who are obsessed with trendy consumer culture, which I guess at this time were called kogals. That's not a term that I'd heard before this. And this series was created in the late 90s, and it is supposed to be humorous and bizarre, and I did find most of the stories fairly bizarre, but humorous, you know, very hit or miss. I would say very much more miss. I did enjoy some of the stories, but this is definitely a very dated series with a lot of very specific kind of Japanese humor that I didn't think translated very well. And like I said, very dated. So I doubt we ever see this get reprinted, even with Furuya being, you know, kind of more popular, more famous for like No Longer Human. Music of Marie got a reprint, Lychee Light Club, stuff like that. I don't see this getting reprinted just because of the content. There's a lot of kind of misogyny in some of these stories, a lot of sexualized stuff with teenagers that I just don't think holds up and is something that that we'll ever see reprinted. So if you're a big Furuya fan and you want this in your collection and you can find it for cheap, go ahead and grab it. But otherwise, if this wasn't Furuya and I didn't have more of his other works, I probably would have unhauled this too. We have a couple Volume 1 Yuri series, and the reason why I'm putting these together, both very similar stories. They are both about adult women characters who are roommates, and in both stories, one of the characters has their life together. One of them is more of a slacker, and in both of them, even though they're slice of life Yuri romantic comedies, there is not a lot of actual romance going on in any of these stories. If there wasn't a Yuri label on them, you could just say these are roommate stories. There's not a lot of romance, not really a lot to let you know that these are actually couples other than the description. So both these volumes were okay. They had me engaged enough where I'm going to pick up volumes, at least another volume or two, and give them a shot. But nothing too special as far as Yuri books go. Next up, we have some autobiographical manga that I gave 3 stars to. We have a new series, or a new one-shot, Embrace Your Size, My Own Body Positivity, which, as you can guess from the title, is about this manga creator who learns over her life to embrace her size. So it's an autobiography of her whole life and how she's lived when her body didn't match the shape that she kind of saw in other media. So if you've read any autobiographical manga before, it follows pretty much the same format as almost every one of those I've read, where each story kind of has its own topic and goes through different encounters, different things that happen in their lives regarding the topic. So I found this one interesting. The artwork is nice, but it did get a little bit repetitive, especially near the end. I think this didn't really need to be a full manga volume as far as the information that they were trying to give. But yeah, if the topic interests you, go ahead and check it out. But it was just okay, not one of my favorite autobiographical manga. Next, we have another autobiography. We have Insufficient Direction by Mayoko Ano. And this is about her marriage. She's a manga creator, and her marriage with her director, anime and live action film director husband, Hideki Ano. And so this is more of a comedic autobiography. It's about both of them being pretty hardcore otaku and how they live together and just kind of the hijinks they get into. She draws herself as a baby, and she draws her husband kind of as a more chubby man, which he talks about in the afterword. So, I found this one okay. I probably would have liked this better. This is another one where there's a lot of very specific Japanese references. There's a pretty big annotation page in the back, which kind of explains a lot of the otaku references that I didn't really get. So there's a lot of stuff going on that probably would be more humorous if I had that level of, 70s and 80s anime background where I knew all these obscure shows and why these jokes are humorous. As you can see here, I'm kind of showing you all the annotations in the back, and then there's an interview with her husband about how he felt about how he was portrayed in this. So if you're an Ano fan, definitely check this out. But yeah, I found it good, but it's not something that you must have in your collection. Okay, next we have a Shuzo Oshimi one-shot, Avant-Garde Yumiko. And this story, as you can kind of tell from the cover, is about a girl who is, it's a high school teenager who is obsessed with drawing penises, and she has this obsession with wanting to see one in real life. So it's not a sexual thing in the story, it's just she has this weird curiosity about seeing one in person, and she draws them obsessively. So if you've read any of Oshimi's work, you kind of know the weirdness that you're going to get in this. Like his other one-shots that I've read, his one-shots are definitely not as enjoyable as his ongoing series, but I still found this to be funny and interesting. He has a very weird view of the world, and he has some interesting storytelling choices that I enjoy. So I recommend this if you're an Oshimi fan. If not, this is not the first thing that I would recommend you pick up from Oshimi. Definitely pick up one of his more ongoing series. But yeah, glad to have this in the collection. It's definitely an odd one. Okay, and last in the volume in the 3-star stack, we've got some more volume 1s. And first off, we have Exyakuza and Stray Kitten Volume 1. I love my cat manga. This one was just okay. As the title suggests, we have an ex-Yakuza member who takes in a stray kitten. The stray kitten is, throughout this whole story, the thing that turned me off the most about it. The whole entire story, the stray kitten is skeptical of this ex-Yakuza member, and even though the guy is doing everything he can and has a love for cats and takes care of the cats, it's a little over the top and slapsticky, a little more than I was expecting. I was expecting it to be a little more straightforward, kind of more of man and his cat type storytelling, whereas this one is a little more just over the top and exaggerated. But I'll definitely check out another volume or two and see if it gets better. But at least in this first volume, just okay. Artwork is fine, but nothing special. Okay, next up we have one of the most polarizing series I've heard about in 2022, and that is Romantic Killer Volume 1. This is a full color Shoujo Beat release. I don't think we get a lot of full color releases in that line, and it revolves around a high school girl who loves her life. She plays video games, she plays with her cat, she has no interest in romance, and this magical creature comes down and removes everything that she enjoys and instead forces her to be in these romantic situations with these two boys. So for her to return to her normal life, she has to play along with what this creature, alien character wants her to do. The main character I found interesting. The two boys that they've introduced, not so much. But I'm willing to give this one, again, a volume or two to see where it goes. I didn't have the negative reaction that a lot of people had about this. I thought it was okay, nothing spectacular. Lastly, in the 3-star, we have Last Gender, When We Are Nameless, Volume 1. This is a Kodansha 18+ book. There's a lot of sexual content in this. It revolves around people of different genders and sexual orientations, all meeting up at a bar where they can be their true selves. This bar also acts as like a brothel, so that's where the sexual kind of adult content happens in this. And I did enjoy this series. It has good representation of different genders. The characters are very interesting. My only negative why I didn't give this a 4 stars is that it is a little explanatory. There's a lot of, I feel like some of the characters are explaining stuff to the other characters where the dialogue just doesn't sound natural. It kind of almost feels like they're giving each other TED Talks where they're explaining genders, where it just doesn't feel like natural conversation, especially when there's characters that are coming out to their significant others. It just didn't feel that natural to me. But otherwise, I did really enjoy this one. I'm looking forward to Volume 2 and seeing where it goes from there. Okay, so now moving on to the 4-star books. First off, we have a Glacier Bay release, the Carmen line. This is a short story collection. Very nice release by Glacier Bay. Lots of different art styles that the creator uses. Nice blue ink. I really like the ink choices that Glacier Bay uses in a lot of their books. As you can see here, a lot of different art styles. Very dreamy stories, very similar, kind of reminds me of Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, like lots of kind of very, not plot heavy, but more kind of dreamy, and they all focus about the Carmen line. So this is one of the better Glacier Bay books that I've read, so I highly recommend this one if you're into kind of more offbeat short story collections. Definitely check out the Carmen line. Next up, we have another new series. We have Coffee Moon Volume 1. This one, haven't really heard too much about this, but I really enjoyed this. Very similar, kind of got your kind of standard Groundhog Day story where we have a character, the main character, keeps waking up and repeating the same day over and over again, which happens to be her birthday. But one thing that's interesting about this story that's different than other stories of this style is that it's not showing you her finding out about this first day throughout this story. When it very first starts, she's already been doing this thousands of times. And so it definitely feels different, has a different take than you normally get in these kind of Groundhog Day styles. And I'm not going to go too much more into it because I don't want to spoiler anybody who is looking to read this. But very weird, very interesting. I really like the direction that it's going. The artwork is great, and I'm looking forward to finding out more about what goes on in the story. Highly recommend Coffee Moon. Okay, so next up we have a one-shot, and that is Skygrazer, which is a short story collection. This is from the same creator of Heavenly Delusion. Pretty sure that's why we got this released, because of the popularity of Heavenly Delusion, because most of these stories are around 10 to 12 years old, so I doubt we would have got this otherwise. And this is probably the weirdest book I read in 2022, and that is why I gave it 4 stars. I was really kind of going between 3 and 4 stars, but this is just so weird. It's very hard to describe. The very first story started off very weird. It's about these 3 boys who find these adult magazines, and normally in a story like that, you would kind of have them just, they'd be like, oh great, we got these magazines, and move on. But in almost every one of these stories, it's about the characters like trying to do these elaborate, thought out reasonings of why the magazines were there, like who left them there, why did somebody else not pick them up. And so they're doing like these elaborate like detective kind of plots of how they're trying to figure out who left these magazines, that 3 other people might have picked them up beforehand. They're trying to think of all these elaborate plot points of why this stuff would happen. And every one of the stories in this is like this. The detectives, they find someone in a bed that had a heart attack, and instead of just going, okay, they had a heart attack, one of the detectives is like, they came sliding in from a window from a building next door, slid perfectly onto the bed and died. It's just like this elaborate stuff that these characters keep coming up with. Very weird, very hard to explain. I know that didn't make any sense, but I did really enjoy this, even though it is very weird. So know that going into it. But it did make me a lot more interested. I mean, I'm collecting Heavenly Delusion. I was excited to read it, but after reading this, I'm definitely looking forward to that quite a bit more. And that's Skygrazer. Okay, so now we have a 4-volume, really old out-of-print series, Antique Bakery by Fumi Yoshinaga. This is a digital manga publishing release, and these releases are soft covers with a dust jacket, which is pretty rare. And they also have scratch and sniff covers, which, because of how old they are, the scratch and sniff does not work. But I did find that pretty interesting when I picked up the first one of these at a used place and saw that there was a scratch and sniff part of it. They just kind of smell like nothing now. But here's the 4 volumes. The 4th volume is a little bit thicker. Most of these old Fumi Yoshinaga DMP releases are BL titles. This one I really wouldn't consider a BL. One of the characters is gay, but it's more a comedy revolving around these. It starts out with 3 characters, but it ends up with 4 characters working at this bakery in Japan where they're making French pastries. So the main chef is French trained, and he's one of the best bakers in the whole world. And so it revolves around these characters, how their working relationships, how they become friends. Very interesting story. Like a lot of Yoshinaga works that I've read, it takes a little while to get into the humor of it. With it being older, it's I wouldn't say dated, but it just takes, you know, some of the humor isn't quite, you know, it definitely takes a little while to get into the rhythm of her type of humor. So I'd say probably once it got to volume 2 and 3 is when I started really connecting with it. And even though it's a comedy and pretty lighthearted, it does take some dark turns. There's like a plot line that goes on throughout the series about a child kidnapping that's going on. So it's all over the place as far as what goes on in this story. But if you can find this for a decent price, some of these volumes are a little pricey. Definitely check it out. I really enjoy Yoshinaga's work, and that's going to be one of my goals for 2023 is to try to collect some more of her stuff. I really want to read Oku, which is kind of her long form story, her longest story that I really want to check out. So that is Antique Bakery. Okay, next up we have a Yuri one-shot. This is an all-in-one. I think this was originally maybe 3 volumes in Japan, but we got it in this all-in-one. And this is Mizuno and Chayama by Yuta Nishio, who is the same creator who did After Hours, another really good Yuri series that I enjoyed. This one is a little darker than that one. There is 2 main characters. One of them is bullied pretty heavily, so if that type of content bothers you, the bullying in this is very uncomfortable. But one of the 2 girls is bullied. The other one's trying to protect her as much as she can. Both of these girls they're part of rival families where they're not supposed to hang out together. So all of their interactions, for the most part, happen at school. They kind of hide away at school and hang out. And so the actual romance between the 2 girls is very sweet, very, very enjoyable. But it's basically about how everybody else in the world is trying to tear them apart. And so, yeah, so that's the main plot. Like I said, a little hard to follow in places. I read some other reviews, and that seems to be something that almost every person that reviewed this mentioned, was that, you know, they'd kind of have to flip through pages. It kind of, some of it was a little hard to follow. The ending I had to reread because I was like, what happened? So definitely a lot more hard to follow than After Hours, which I found a little bit more straightforward. But definitely a very enjoyable read, very interesting. But it does get dark. It's more of a dark Yuri series than I would say. So just know that going into it. Next, I read Last Chance to Find Duke. This is by a Chinese creator who lives in France, and it is about a researcher trying to find a rare cricket whose noise sounds like jazz. So very interesting story, great artwork. You can see here just some really nice, really detailed artwork. I really like the art style, the storytelling. I do wish this was longer, or that this was an ongoing series. I definitely wish I could get more from this creator and with these characters. It wraps up a little quickly. But otherwise, just a really interesting read. I found all the side characters great, the people in this small town that he meets as he's doing his research. Highly recommended if you can find this. The reason I picked this up, someone had put this on, I think it was on Twitter. Someone had mentioned that this publisher was going to be closing up. I think it's Piao or Pow Books. And so I don't even think this one's still available. But it is fairly new. It's only came out in the last few months. So if you can find this, definitely check it out. Very unique, very enjoyable one-shot, and that is Last Chance to Find Duke. Okay, so next we have another Volume 1. We have Dungeon People Volume 1. This is one that I hadn't pre-ordered, but I did, after seeing some reviews of it, I went ahead and picked it up after it was already released. And the reason why, I don't read a lot of manga that revolve around dungeons and kind of, you know, more fantasy series where they're going through dungeons trying to figure stuff out. But this one's a little different. So we have a teenage girl who is going through dungeons, looking for her missing father who's missing in one of the dungeons. And you find out that these dungeons are fake, and that she gets a look behind them, and she gets asked to basically manage this dungeon where she sets up traps, sets up treasures. And it's just a very unique story that Very wordy, so I know I have seen some people complain about how wordy it is, but I did enjoy. That doesn't usually bother me in manga, so I wasn't too bothered by it. It's not an action series if you're expecting like an action dungeon series. It's more about the inner workings of a dungeon and how to set them up and that type of stuff. But I found it very interesting, very unique story, and kind of silly cute artwork. More cute. I know I don't think some people were impressed with the artwork either, but I thought it was cute and just a good read. So I'm looking forward to volume 2. So now we're getting on to the really good stuff, and we're going to start off with my Kyoto Mori stack of stuff I read through this month. And the main thing that I read was all of Emma. Now that the 4th hardcover finally got reprinted, and I was able to finally fully read this series in these really nice hardcover editions. I love Mori's artwork. She draws characters. I just really like the way that she draws women characters. The faces are fantastic. Just a really good story. Exactly as good as I imagined it was going to be. If you enjoy Victorian stories, if you enjoy Downton Abbey, a series which I loved, you're going to enjoy this story. We got volume 2, volume 3, and this release reminded me a lot of Rose of Versailles, which I did not know this going into it, but about halfway through hardcover 4, the Emma story wrapped up. So the actual, about halfway through volume 4 here, in case anybody was unaware, the story ends, the actual Emma story, and then the rest of volume 4 and all of volume 5 is stories featuring the other characters. And then there is a wrap up at the very end. So it's very similar to the way Rose of Versailles, those hardcovers are set up, where it ends about halfway through volume 4 and then side stories take up the rest of the way. And these are all very interesting characters, so I did really enjoy those stories. I was not upset that that happened, but just as a heads up, if you're going into this thinking all 5 volumes are this one long story, it does end halfway through volume 4, which I was not expecting until I got to the end of it. And Mori, like a lot of creators that I really enjoy, great afterwards, great stories in between the chapters. I just really enjoy reading about her passion for Victorian history and her, just her making this series. So I'm so glad that I got to read this, that we finally got this all reprinted. Just a really great series. Emma has me hyped to read A Bride Story once it wraps up. Can't recommend this one enough. Then that is Emma. Okay, so after I was done reading Emma, I wanted to read through some of the other Mori stuff that I had. So first off, we have Shirley Volume 1. This is a long out of print CMX release. We only got Volume 1 in English. There is a Volume 2 that was released in Japan. And so if anybody knows how to read that volume translated in English, please let me know. These are actually stories that came out before Emma. This is more of a short story collection, but it features similar Victorian era stories. The first half of this is about this maid Shirley, who's a 13-year-old, and she gets to start working as a maid. But some of the later stories are about different characters, but they all revolve around the same Victorian era as Emma does. So the artwork is you can definitely tell she polished up when she was working on Emma, so it's a little rougher in this volume, but still very enjoyable story. She does great characters, and I would love to be able to read Volume 2, which we didn't get in English. And then lastly, I read through, of Kyoto Mori stuff, I read through this one-shot hardcover, Anything and Something, which is another short story collection, I guess art book you would say. And this is another, like Shirley, out of print, unfortunately. So hopefully this gets reprinted. But it shows all the things kind of that Kyoto Mori loves to draw. Women in bunny suits. She likes to draw Victorian women, so maids. All the things that she loves to draw are in this story, or in this short story collection, which is about maybe half the book. And then we get a lot of art pages kind of showing off different art stuff that she draws. But very descriptive. Like, you don't get a lot of this in a lot of manga creators, where there's really in-depth descriptions of their art, what they're drawing. I mean, as you can see here, just if you have any interest in Mori's work, try to hunt this down for a decent price, or read it online, or wait for a reprint. But yeah, if you enjoyed Emma, definitely check this out. This is a great kind of art book, short story collection all in one. Really enjoyable. Okay, and lastly, we have the thing I enjoyed the most this month, and that was the entire Akira box set I finally read through in the month of December. This one is one that's a little intimidating. It's a classic manga series, well loved. It's got a very popular anime movie, which I had seen a couple times, but it's been 20 plus years since I've watched it. But the thing that the main reason that I wanted to read this month is because of how much they've been loving it on the Manga Splaining podcast. Every season they read another one of these hardcovers, and they've all really loved it and talked about how fantastic the artwork, how great the storytelling was, and I've got to say it did not disappoint. It was a surprisingly fast read. Like, I was expecting it to be a little bit harder to get through, but it was not. It is a very easy read. The storytelling is very good. The artwork, like has been mentioned many times, is fantastic. I really wish we would get more Otomo releases in English. Most of his other stuff is out of print, but these Kodansha hardcovers are fantastic. Great color pages, nice dust jackets. Show all 6 hardcovers. I remembered the bare minimum of the story from the movie, but I do, obviously with these being 6 giant hardcovers, there is a lot of stuff that happens in these stories that was not in the movie. Stuff is different than it was in the movie, but just amazing. Like, this was everything that I was expecting it to be and more. This is a great cover. So yeah, if you have the Akira, if at one time you bought the Akira box set and it's sitting on your shelves and you're scared off of it, don't be scared off of it. It's not a scary read. It is a very easy to read series, very enjoyable. I can't recommend it enough. So the box set has these 6 hardcovers. It also comes with this Akira Club book, which basically acts as an art book. Shows a lot of background art, a lot of unused art, or art used in other, like for the individual comics or title pages that was left out of these hardcover releases. So if you enjoyed Akira, you definitely are going to want to check out this really nice release. I did enjoy it. I'm usually, like I said, I've mentioned before, I'm not usually one for art books, but I did find this one enjoyable, and the little notes that were written, some of them by Otomo, were interesting, and this made for a good add-on kind of to the back end of reading through Akira, which is an all-time great sci-fi series, fantastic characters, great artwork. Can't recommend it enough. Great end to the year was reading through both Akira and Emma. Glad I finally got to read those 2. But yeah, that was it. That was everything I read in December. I've got a ton that I'm looking forward to reading in 2023. Hopefully I can keep up with the about 30 to 40 volumes is kind of what I'm going to try to read every month. My plan for the end of the year is to have read 400 volumes, which I did hit in 2022. So that was it. Everybody have a great new year, and thanks for watching.